Ready graphics? Ready theme? Cue graphics.
Good evening. For your information tonight.
Hi, I'm Jesse Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And this is FYI,
The Murphy Brown Podcast.
We've talked about the love of gym dance.
Sexy NPR Lauren, not sold in stores.
Only here.
Where the hell are we? Can we talk about the toupee, please?
Can we?
I've been wanting to talk about this toupee for most of my
Let's
life.
talk. And on today's episode,
We'll be talking about Season 1, Episode 7, Set Me Free.
hello everyone.
Hello.
Here we are. We're in the last episode of 1988.
Yes, we are.
How exciting is that?
Last episode before the Christmas break.
Hey, you know what? I heard a little something.
Oh, no. Yes.
Happy birthday to you, Lauren Milberger. It's your birthday, and it's happy Lauren Milberger. Happy birthday.
Oh, my God. It is my birthday.
It is your birthday.
This is dropping on my birthday.
Happy birthday
Happy
dropping.
Aw. Just my breasts.
Birthday drop. Little birthday boob drop.
Actually, they look better now.
Yeah, they do.
Thank you.
I'm gonna say you're
They were
a
little
nicely shaped woman, Lauren
Thank you.
Milberger.
Well, I am a Jew.
Yes, you are.
They were a little too perky.
Really?
Yeah.
That has literally never been a problem for me in my life. I'm Irish German. And we are
No, this
We
sounds
are-
like a humble brag now. I didn't mean it that way.
I
was trying to make a bad joke.
Love yourself. You know what? The grass is greener on every side, and I am very happy with my endowments, and every pro has a con.
So something interesting as well is 7 is one of my lucky numbers, and it's episode 7 on my birthday.
Hey.
My lucky numbers are 2, 5, and 7.
Mine's
I
5.
think everybody... Really?
Yes.
Oh,
I feel like there's something that happened between us that happened on like a 5th or something.
maybe. Did we meet on the 5th?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
But here we are. We're doing season 1, episode 7, Set Me Free. It was written by Diane English, directed by Barnett Kellman, and it aired on December 19th of 1988.
The first song is The Way You Do the Things You Do, which I absolutely adore. This was close to me putting on my favorite on the website.
Yeah.
This was really close.
It's such a good song, and everybody knows it.
It was a 1964 hit single by The Temptations for the Gordy Motown label. It was written by Miracle members, someone named Smokey Robinson.
Oh, man, that sounds, I don't know.
familiar.
Did I meet that guy once? I don't know.
Nah, maybe went on a date on with them.
probably.
Yeah. It gets mentioned in this episode, funny enough.
Oh, it does?
Yeah. And Bobby Rogers. The single was The Temptations' first charting single on the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at the top 20 at number 11. They recorded it 2 weeks after David Ruffin was hired, replacing founding Temptation Elbridge Bryant. So it was recorded on January 8th, and then it was released on January 23rd, 1964. That is a quick turnaround.
That actually really is.
Yeah. That's
So
like internet turnaround.
that is internet turn.
Yeah.
Ooh, they were snappy for the day.
Yes.
So our opening vignette is to The Way You Do the Things You Do.
Real quick, can I just say something before we start? Something I found out, what I think is really interesting, is so not only is it the last episode of 1988, aired December 19th, 1988, the next week for Christmas, the 26th, it was preempted by a TV movie called Quiet Victory, the Charlie, am I saying this right? Wedemeyer story?
Wiedemeyer?
Wedemeyer?
Sure.
Yeah. Which starred Michael Nury, who would later go on to be in Love and War.
Yes, he did.
And Pam Dauber from My Sister Sam.
Wow, it is the smallest world in which Diane English is the epicenter.
So I just felt I had to mention that. Now, of course, I know this because when I was a wee child, I wrote a letter to CBS asking for all the titles
You are my favorite child.
because I found titles interesting because I
They
had
are interesting.
a writer's brain, didn't realize I had a writer's brain, and they weren't listed for sitcoms. And we didn't have them in the paper or the internet.
I feel like I didn't really notice TV titles until the printed TV guide when I was a little older and Friends was going.
Yeah, TV Guide eventually started showing the titles.
The TV guide that was in the paper that you would flip out and find the day, and it was all the gray and white lines, and you try to find.
I
everything.
noticed because the dramas I would watch would have the titles of the opening, and then Murphy Brown wouldn't.
Well, the first time I ever noticed titles was the fact that Friends started with the one.
Oh,
where,
yeah.
You know, like that's when I first noticed it.
So I guess they didn't know what to do. So CBS just sent me sort of the airing sheet. I don't know what it's called. It probably has a real name that I can't think of.
It does, but now I have airing sheet in my mind, so I'm going to say yes.
Airing sheet. And so it actually lists everything, including all the preempted stuff.
Amazing.
So we'll eventually talk about when it was preempted for basketball.
I just find it fascinating that they didn't play the Christmas episode the next week.
Yes, which again we talked about.
But
it's weird.
anyway.
And then, of course, this episode, as we mentioned before, was shot out of order. This is supposed to be the second episode of the season.
Yes. So last episode when we talked about with Carl approaching Murphy and already knowing that he's proclaimed his love for her, that happens in this episode. So if you're going back and looking at stuff, the Carl that offers that he is a virile man and a stud option is the Carl that comes after this.
Yeah. And then as we go through the episode, we'll talk about what we talked about before, is that putting Murphy being tempted to falling off the wagon later in the series has so much more resonance than if it was the second episode.
It does, and it really, as we're going to talk about it once we get into this, that it really sells that she's having the worst day.
Yeah.
Because it takes the worst day ever to cause her to almost beat this machine to death.
And it's so real because that happens in addiction. And that's something that people don't talk about, that, you were an addict your entire life.
And you are fighting that your entire life.
I mean, there's some people who, Philip Seymour Hoffman, for example,
and were clean for decades.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, and you can't blame them.
And it just takes one. It just takes one bad day. It takes whatever the impetus is. It's, my friend said, she's like, I have an addiction and I will have this addiction for the rest of my life, regardless of if I use again or not. I have an addiction. It is not something that just went away with sheer will. It's the only reason I don't relapse is because of my sheer will, but it will never be gone. I will fight it every day.
And that's something that I think is important for the public who may not have ever dealt with this or had a family member or a friend who had to, that I see when something like this happens, or like when you find out that there were traces of drugs in Carrie Fisher's system, and it's not her fault.
No, you don't blame somebody for being sick.
It really makes me mad. But anyway,
anywho,
let's continue.
Let's
Jesse,
talk about this episode.
Start us off, Jesse.
Let's do this. So we have our opening vignette. It is overscored or underscored. It's scored by the way you do the things you do. Over, under, whatever. And
I want to sing it now so badly.
Murphy, you can't.
I literally can't.
Literally cannot. Murphy is in a great outfit. She's in a gray turtleneck, long turtleneck that almost is long enough to be a sweater dress over a skirt. She's walking down the hallway and she is looking a little worse for wear. She's holding some money and she's taking really calming breaths. They're not working. She is not being calmed by these breaths, but she's trying. And we see her. Now, remind me if I'm wrong. We don't know it's a cigarette machine right away, do we? Or it's just a machine?
I know it's a cigarette machine.
I mean, I know it is, but I was trying to remember if we only see... It's fine. I only watched this episode 3 times in prep. I didn't note that. But anyway, she passes a cigarette machine, looks around to see if anyone's watching her.
It's such great visual acting from Candace.
Her physical work in this, we'll talk about something in particular in a second, but her physical work in this opening montage is amazing. So she puts the money in, and it's one of those old school machines where you pull the knob and then the thing comes out. She's pulling a knob, doesn't work. She pulls all of the knobs, doesn't work. She runs her hands over the top of it, and that's what I love. She's touching it like an old friend, and then she does the a little smack.
It's so good.
That is this has worked for her in the past. This is what gets a jammed cigarette pack out.
And also the whole time she's doing it with that sort of anxiety in her body that someone's going to come and find that she's doing this.
And I love that she doesn't just slam it really hard out of control. She doesn't smack it a few times. It's like hands go over it. She's familiar. Smack, smack. It doesn't work. And unfortunately, she then takes the edges of the sides. She shakes it like you would, trying to get your bag of chips out. And her hair is everywhere. She lays her arm on the machine. Her forehead goes down. And then she looks around. You see the light bulb go. And she finds a lamp and she's lunging in to take it out. And that's when our dear Frank enters with a huge, puts himself in between the machine and her.
Reaction.
With a Murph, what are you doing? It's so
great. Call attention to me.
Call attention to me. It's so good. He runs in. I mean, you would think that she was about to beat a child.
Yeah. He's such a great friend.
He's so good. And he's so genuine in his shock and concern. And that's what I love. There's no commentary beyond this concern and love for her. And it's such a quick moment, but you see how sincere he is. And I love it. And he realizes what she's going for. He tells her she's been doing great and asks her if she's not going to blow it now.
I love that.
Which, again, I love his reaction in this episode, Jim's reaction, as we find out later. Jim is the one who took her to rehab. You see that they're invested and he knows exactly what she's going for. and every moment for them to
And then it's
enforce
so
this is
crazy
there.
that she's so crazed that she has to break it.
Yeah, she knows.
Because he doesn't know that she's having a bad day. You know, it could just be that she's just so manic to have a cigarette.
Yeah,
Which she also, I guess, is. But
But he's being such a great supportive friend.
oh, so good.
And she tells him that it's been a very strange day. And he wants her to tell him about it, which again is a talk to me. Let's go through this, as opposed to jumping to a quick fix.
So also I think it's interesting is that, you know, during this thing, as she says, I've been out of Betty Ford for a month. And that works now.
It does.
And that was, I think, why I was so surprised when Corby told us that this was shot out of order.
Exactly.
So the second episode, she's been, they jumped a month?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I wonder if they changed that line.
I couldn't tell if it was ADR. Could you see her face?
You can. I wonder if it was written second and then no, because we know it was filmed.
Yeah.
Very interesting that they did the pilot and then jumped.
Yeah.
Which actually kind of makes sense. If you do an establishing episode and then the show, now that we're past that established moment, now we're going to jump ahead to in the life of. We've met these characters. We know this dynamic. Now let's jump ahead. Now they've been with each other
But
for
it
a while.
oddly just makes it fit.
It works. I guess they did themselves a favor being able to reorder it that way. She says, it's been going okay. Terrific, as a matter of fact. But today is different. And I love the fact that she acknowledges that there have been good days. She's actually been doing well. And again, it still tracks. Like, she's been out of it for a month. She's been following it. She has not relapsed yet, but today did it for her. I love he takes the sugar out of her hand and then gives her honey.
Oh, I love it. Well, I love the fact that first she tries to get coffee, and before she can pour it in her cup, he puts a tea bag in the cup.
Yes, he just
And then
keeps
he keeps trying to
quietly
replace. Yes,
eating.
it's such a beautiful little friend thing to do.
It is, and it says so much more about their relationship than any like pivotal scene full of lines that say how much you care. It's
Physicality.
it's those little moments, and they like, yeah, I see what you're doing. That's fine. I'm just gonna. It's that idea of while it's her lifelong battle to fight the addiction, he has signed up for a lifelong friendship of just enabling the good, and he signed up to support her through thick and thin, through everything, even if it's a small conversation in the break station, he's gonna be there.
Yeah, he's a committer,
He is a committer.
just
that's
not
Frank.
with women.
Oh, Frank.
He's so scared. Okay, go ahead.
So she has this great line where she says, I have a very strong urge to walk across the street to Phil's, order a scotch and soda, smoke an entire carton of cigarettes, and listen to Lil Peggy March saying, I will follow him.
It's one of my favorite line readings that Candace has ever done.
It's so natural.
It's just, and also, I mean, the rhythm of the line is great, but it's,
So
and she goes, I will follow him.
I will follow him. And so this song, many of you probably have heard this song before in various forms, but the song was recorded in 1961 by Frank. Is it Frank or Frank? It's a CK.
I don't know. You're asking the dyslexic how to
I'm
pronounce
so
something?
sorry about that. We're going to say Frank Porcel began as an instrumental piece, and then it was released also as an EP. I believe, pardon me as I'm reading things, they re-released it later. It's had many versions. Petunia Clark did a French language version of it in 1962. And then Little Peggy March's version came out in 1963.
That's the one I feel is the most famous,
And that's the one they're
right?
referencing is Peggy March's.
Sure, yeah.
So it was released by RCA Victor. It reached number 1 on Billboard Hot 100 in 1963. And she was 15 years old at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She was the youngest female artist to have a U.S. chart-topping single. It reached number 1 in Australia, in Hong Kong, in Israel, South Africa, Uruguay, Canada, New Zealand, and the R&B chart.
I should have guessed because she was Little Peggy March. And then
Peggy March.
There was Little Stevie Wonder, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The way that I knew it best growing up, we're back to me watching too much Sister Act as a child, was...
Shout out to Mark Shaman.
So I knew, obviously I loved Sister Act a lot, and she opens with a mashup of Heatwave and I Will Follow Him. And then at the end, they rewrite it to be about God, and they sing it for the Pope.
I will follow him.
Follow him.
Follow him wherever he may go. There isn't an ocean too deep.
Copyright. So we'll chill out on the copyright problems. So
$60,000 degree in voice and speech.
it's fine. We're great at this. Frank doesn't want her to go back to her old self. And he said, remember the Mother Teresa interview?
So hard on the woman.
So Murphy's like, it's fine. I just have to get through this day. And then my Corky swans in. And she's wearing this draped blue multicolored scarf.
So you know it's not December.
You know it's not December. And she's talking about the lovely day she had. She walked through Jefferson Memorial. The squirrels were playing. She's just like having this, like, could any day be better than this? And then Murphy chimes in that she hit a squirrel with her car on the way in this morning. And poor Corey's like, oh, like her reaction is just like, dang it.
I also love the reaction on Frank and Murphy's face, because I'd always noticed Murphy, but I didn't notice that Frank is also like, oh, come on. Like, this is, or maybe he just knows that Murphy's going to say something. I don't know, but he looks really uncomfortable while she's talking.
Yep. And Frank says, listen, Murphy, you're not alone. You have friends to help you.
Which I wrote, that's the thesis of Murphy Brown.
It is. It's what makes it so special.
Yeah.
Which immediately causes Jim to go, who needs help? And you're right. This is our first slugger.
Yeah,
in written form.
technically it's our first slugger
What's
because
the
this was
problem?
filmed
Yeah.
first.
What's the problem, slugger?
Yeah, but
which my heart just bursts.
But technically we've heard slugger before, but this is the time in filming order. This is
Yeah,
the first
exactly.
slugger. Yeah.
So it's the first time they wrote it in, and it makes sense because it's a sweet paternal moment. These are the moments that make my heart just burst for Jim. And she says, "I want to smoke and drink a lot," and he just goes, "Don't do that." And she goes, "Okay, there you go. See you on set."
But I love the way she goes, I want to smoke and drink a lot.
He goes, "Don't do it."
Okay.
There you go. See you on set. And just walks
Yeah.
out like, did it, nailed it. Good talk. Good talk. Good talk. I love Jim. So she decides she needs to keep her mind on work. And I love what she says. She loves the broadcast. She's going to focus on the broadcast. She loves her desk. She loves her chair. Her favorite part is when the guy comes up and puts his little mics on her lapels. And then that makes her feel better.
Yeah, and they're in the office now, right?
They're in the office, and this is the first time we see the dartboard for this one, which I feel like it's like the prophetic dartboard that says "Have a nice day" with a smiley
so
face.
perfect.
on it. And Miles enters with bad news, guys. This show's canceled. Only kidding. And Murphy tries to murder him.
I love when she does this. There's actually an episode where they literally have to carry her out.
Yes.
It's such a sitcom sort of tropey
so
moment
good.
thing. I love that stuff.
And so because he's saying the worst thing possible in his Miles way. And he says it's the second time she tried to kill him. He says, "I'm sorry, I thought Smokey Robinson was a forest ranger." He's referencing Smokey the Bear, kids.
I love that joke.
Which I love because I got it as a kid
Sure, yeah.
because I knew both of them. Murphy she apologizes, has been a little on edge. He suspects it's because her secretary is making a piñata with her face on it. Or he suspected so because
Yeah.
her secretary is making a piñata with her face on it. And we're talking about the secretary, but we don't see the secretary.
They walked past her.
They walked past her, but
She's
we
like
don't
an
have
extra. I know, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have anything. So it's just the piñata secretary.
So either, she's an extra or they cut it out, maybe. Yeah.
Probably because in this episode is a unique one because we only have 2 locations and we're in, 3 actually. We have an ending location.
We do, yeah.
But it's very simply shot.
And there's no fishbowl, and you can tell that this is the second episode because there's not a lot of stuff in her office.
Exactly. It's not pimped out yet with the Murphyisms. So Frank has to finish his copy for the show, but he wants you to remember that they're focusing 1 hour at a time and they hold hands. Like
It's really beautiful.
it's their real relationship. You feel the love. And especially because this is the second episode that was filmed, like they already had that. It's just so lovely.
Well, then when Frank leaves, like Miles like pats him on the back.
Yeah.
Like there's this physicality that like, they're
they
all sort of
really get each
bonded,
other.
yeah.
I do see the second episode I see where we haven't gone the mileage with Murphy and Miles yet.
Yes, and it's a little.
We haven't had the scoop episode.
Yeah,
you know?
and he because he does say he wants a better relationship with her,
Yeah.
and you're not one of us later on, and it's nothing I thought about when I watched it before,
No.
but now knowing that I go, oh, we
That's
haven't
the
had nowhere
one
to run.
bit
Yeah,
that the development doesn't quite track
Yeah.
for my brain. But I also, again, trying, as we said in our last episode, trying to explain the headcanon that we create and the bit of the emotional retcon that happens with this is that I write it off as she's having a really terrible day and she kind of relapsed into not appreciating him.
yeah, and it's not like because they had that moment and they
Doesn't
shared
mean
the
they're
hug.
fine.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they have a real relationship yet. They're just slowly building towards it.
So it does work. The "you're not one of us" it does rub me a bit the wrong way, but I also see it as they're in a fairly traumatic and stressful situation, so you say things you don't mean.
yeah, but also in that moment, you can throw out everything that she still doesn't really know him very well.
Exactly.
So she can throw out everything.
And he's not a journalist.
Yeah.
He just isn't.
So just because he,
And they don't know that he can handle it.
Yeah. So it's not knowing it didn't bug me at all.
Yeah. It's the being aware of the mechanics made me notice
Yeah.
it, but it hadn't bothered me prior.
Not at all.
Murphy gets back to work. Miles sits down. He has really good news. And Murphy's response is Diane Sawyer missing? Which I love.
It's just great because they're friends.
Because they're friends.
Well, Candace, I mean, and
Yes.
Diane Sawyer.
Because, of course they'd be. He tells...
Well, Mike Nichols.
Yep, exactly. So he tells her that they've gone up one rating point, and he does this. We were talking about this earlier. He drums on the desk.
It's such a great physicality and like a little
It's a little
addition.
kid thing. Like, it's so cute.
I remember, and I can't remember who it was. Candace Bergen who said it. Her Diane English. I think it was Diane in this behind the scenes special that they feel like Grant would like go up into his dressing room with like little beakers.
Yeah.
You know, like figurative beakers, and like come up with these little sort of little things that he would do.
I love it.
I love that quote.
Murphy thinks that it's must have been the piece on Nuns After Dark.
I love about this scene is that she's ignoring him and just typing on an electric typewriter.
Hey, that was super fancy at the time.
Hey, I took a typing class. We had them.
I remember my mom's, or maybe my mom had an electric. I feel like she's going to text me now and tell me that she had an electric typewriter. But in my brain as a child, the one I was playing on was old school. Pretty sure it was electric, actually.
I always remember because I used to watch the original Freaky Friday all the time. Is that the mother doesn't know that you have to plug it in?
I love that.
And that's
movie.
the early 70s, I think,
Yeah.
that movie. Yeah, but she can't use it, and she realizes she has to plug it
Just
in.
plug it in because it's not just
It's not just a typewriter.
this analog thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's doing that. She's making notes with her pencil, and then she's putting it in her mouth. Like, she's doing all these Murphyisms and
I
this
love it.
kind of the down and dirty. This is the woman who rolls her sleeves up kind of thing. That she's focused. And he tries to tell her that there are things he doesn't know about her, that he wants to have a better relationship. And she has this great line about, "You're my boss and you're the same age as Amy Carter."
I love that line.
For reference,
Okay.
for people who aren't sure, Amy Carter is Jimmy Carter's daughter. So if you're looking at the later 90s and we're looking at Chelsea Clinton, this girl was that. She went in, when he went into office as president, she was 9. So for their reference, and this was in the 70s when he was in office? Yeah. Just making sure I'm right. So when this is an easy reference for them at the time, because that was the child of the president that she was like the eternal child in the political
And if
spectrum.
you're an adult,
Yeah, the idea
And
of being
yeah.
Amy Carter's age is she's a child. Doesn't matter that, yeah, actually at that point she
Well,
was graduating
this
college.
just remind me because I was looking for some articles in my scrapbook to bring in for some episodes ahead, and one of them is about faith, and she talked about that for some gift, Candace gave everyone magazines from the year that they were born.
I love that
Yeah.
stuff.
And so she was like, she gave it to Faith, and she was like, I was in college.
Yep.
This can't be real. Like, and they kind of made fun of her for it.
And he says, underneath this tough facade is a very insecure human being.
Yes, Miles, we know.
We know, Miles. Murphy gets he has something to say. And he says he thinks that her piece on prison conditions was a little down. And he says, how about a tour of the Bra Museum of Fredericks of Hollywood? I love that. The
buzzer
repeating
sound. Yeah.
that happens. She's clearly going to kill him. And he says, no, we will have a good relationship. Like, he is set on connecting with her. And he sees that she's holding one of the darts. And so he sprints out of there. And as she throws it, the door closes and she gets it on the Have a Nice Day dartboard.
I love that they they do a close up of it, and that they fade
It's
into
the
the
first
next
time
scene.
we've focused on the dartboard, really.
Yeah, and the show doesn't do that a lot. Where
No.
they're close ups.
It's
a lot of
perfect.
2 shots.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. Then we go into the broadcast. John, the stage manager, is counting down. I know you love this. Here are the stories for today's episode of FYI.
I love the stories.
Yeah. Frank is doing How Safe Are Our Skies, which is obviously about airport security. Corky's is Halston, Why the Dream Died.
So can we quick talk about Halston?
Sure.
Do you know like kind of the history of Halston?
I guess I don't. I know who Halston
Yeah,
was.
it's the designer.
Yeah.
So Halston actually didn't die much past this. He died on March 26th of 1990, which is actually
So he's alive when this came out.
he was diagnosed with AIDS in 88.
Oh, man.
But so Halston is an American fashion designer, super big in the 70s. He's very known for being very minimalist. They were very clean. It was often like cashmere and ultra suede. And the way he kind of revolutionized the industry was that he believed that women can wear the same clothing for the entire day on any occasion. So he created, this concept of like you can wear the same thing all day. You can go from work to night and you don't have to have like a specific thing.
I had a Barbie like that.
Yeah. And like the idea of day to night was challenged with this, or like your house dress wasn't a concept. Very popular with like Angelica Houston and, you know, these women. And
I'm seeing it now.
yep, right? So it's very interesting. So he was very influential, especially with uniforms. He was contracted by Airways to do their flight attendant uniforms.
Oh, interesting.
Right? It's fascinating. And it started to go down because he licensed with department stores, specifically like JCPenney, did Halston too. And then people started saying that he lost value and became cheap.
I feel like people do that today, though.
They do now, but then it was a huge thing and it basically killed the name.
Oh, How the Dream Died.
How the dream died.
I get it now.
So by this point, when this aired, Halston had not necessarily become a joke, but he had lost the concept of being couture or fashion forward because he'd become affordable and accessible. Now it's been taken over since his death, and it's a respected line. You have H. by Halston and Halston Heritage and so on, and it's been kind of picked up, but it's changed over time. But that's what Halston she's referring to was.
Gotcha. Then Jim throws it to Murphy. She always seems to be the first main story. Usually,
it's Murphy.
It's Murphy. Inner recesses of a nuclear power plant.
Fascinating.
I also realized lately that I think that when Murphy does her on-air voice, I think she's doing Diane Sawyer.
I absolutely agree.
Because I kept thinking of this
I feel like Candace went to Diane.
Probably.
And
well,
practiced
again,
her.
they're friends.
They know each other.
And in fact, I was just reading that she originally wanted Murphy's townhouse to look like Diane's house.
I mean,
But it just didn't read on camera.
do what you know.
Yeah. Mostly because I had this behind the scenes that I would watch all the time from Primetime Live.
Of course you did.
Behind the scenes on a Colleen Dewhurst episode, actually. So when we get to that episode, we will watch it. It is so amazing.
Colleen,
It's so good. And at one point, Diane is just in... she's just in Murphy's office and she picks up the Redskins like mug and she goes, "Go Redskins."
Go Redskins.
And it's a very deep, she goes, "Go Redskins." And it's like, I always think of that in my head and it makes me laugh.
I have to, for my people, I apologize. I am a Vikings fan, and it hurts me to say go Redskins, but I'm just quoting.
Sorry. But it's sort of my own in-joke.
You just say it when you pick up mugs.
I do, go Redskins. Because it's just very like, you know, I'm an anchor. And listen, I love Diane Sawyer. But so I thought I would just add that. So Murphy is about to talk about her story, and then a random guy comes and won't go away.
Well, the best part is he just kind of appears in the background, and at first you're like, maybe he's not in camera sight, and he's like a techie, but he just keeps going, and you see her slowly notice
and she doesn't know
and
if
then
she should
ignore
continue.
it. Yeah.
And then John and Miles are like, come on, like trying to get him to like get out of the camera
I
shot.
love it because they're like crouched down, like they're crawling underneath the camera sight.
Yeah.
So they're at the base of the desk and like gesturing at him.
I mean,
to
this
get out.
episode is such a great to show that the idea of making it a live show was really smart.
Absolutely.
Because even
the
if
stakes are so high.
Exactly. Even if it's not a guy with a gun, things can happen.
Exactly.
And that brings
when Corky steals the story in Devil with the Blue Dress On.
right? That would never happen if it wasn't recorded.
Yeah. They just stop her and give her talking to and then give it to Murphy. Whereas when it's live, you have to save face.
Yeah.
And that's why Murphy does the other story.
I mean, there's going to be a lot more episodes where being live brings about a conflict.
Yep.
Which wouldn't normally happen. So finally, Murphy, excuse me, sir. We're doing a broadcast here. And he said that he'll leave as long as she reads his personal statement. Murphy says no, journalists don't do that. Mm-hmm. And then he pulls out a gun. Miles asks them to cut the cameras, but then he points the gun at him, and so he does leave the cameras on.
Well, he doesn't just point the gun at him. He turns around and says, "Cut the cameras," and then the gun is in his back.
Oh, I forgot
and
that.
He says, "Keep rolling."
Keep rolling. I forgot. That makes more sense.
Finish this and I'll talk.
Yeah. So Murphy introduces herself, and he's like, "I know who you are." His name apparently is Henry.
Henry Tucker.
Thank you. Murphy says that he really doesn't want to do this. And then Henry catches Frank creeping down on the ground and asks him what he was going to do. And Frank is just like, well, I was going to drop down, crawl quietly across the floor, grab your ankles, throw you off balance, and then grab the gun. And Henry thinks that Frank is a lunatic.
I took a shot. That's what I love. He's
I
like,
know.
Come on.
John reminds people that, of course, people are watching
Because it's live.
because it's live. And then Henry introduces everyone by pointing the gun at them.
Oh, and sweet Corky.
She starts to cry.
Which I would. Here's the deal. Again, we were talking about earlier about life since. Mm-hmm. In our current political world climate, I can't laugh at this episode. And because just today there was another shooting in Fayette County. Like, even talking about it as you're describing, like he puts the gun to Miles' back, like this stuff.
That's probably why I forgot it.
Exactly. It's very traumatic to see gun violence right now because it is. And honestly, I kind of hope that the new show talks about this.
I think it will.
I would be surprised if it didn't, but maybe not this episode again. But it is a different world right now where it's not just, oh, that'd be terrible. It's yeah, of course this happened. I mean, not to get too morbid, but I mean, since this aired, we saw a woman get shot on live broadcast.
Yeah.
We've seen that.
That's the first thing I thought of because
Exactly.
It wasn't until we talked to Corby that she told us that this is based on a real event. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, so
I
I
found
have-
this cool article.
Yeah, Lauren found this great article, and it's what it's based on. So this was, the article is from August 20th, 1987, and it's an intruder with a...
Also note, 1987. That means this just happened.
It just happened a year prior. So this was a year and a few months ago.
And it's in LA too, which is
Yep.
why Corby said everyone then knew it,
Yep. So a man pointed what appeared to be a handgun at KNBC TV consumer reporter David Horowitz during a live broadcast and demanded that he read a rambling statement on air about the CIA and space aliens. The intruder was eventually taken to custody a few minutes later. Luckily, it wasn't as long as this episode. But he was identified as Gary Stolman. He was 34 from Tallahassee, Florida. And he's the son of a former KNBC pharmaceutical reporter, Max Stolman. He walked up behind, just like with Murphy, he walked up behind Horowitz and handed him a statement. And unlike this episode, Horowitz took the statement. He put his spectacles on. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, there's a man here who wants me to read a statement." And then he does the same thing Murphy does. He says, "Can I get your name, sir?" And then, "Gary, where are you from?"
That's interesting.
And what I love is this quote from Horowitz says, "The guy came up and put a gun in my back. My first reaction was, I can't believe this is happening. His first words to me were, read this or I'll shoot you." And again, I'm getting like agitated right now. "People told me later how calm I looked, but believe me, I wasn't." And it's the same thing where I remember watching Murphy in this episode and being like, man, she is handling this. And like, I know that they're journalists, and both Murphy and Frank, who's an investigative journalist, they talk about this later when Henry's talking to him, like they've been out in the field, they've been in dangerous situations, but they handle it with such grace and such compassion for the gunman. And it's very
he
interesting
also-
that this happened as well.
The casting also is someone who appears harmless.
Yes.
And that can be
And
deceptive.
seems kind.
Yes. And that can be deceptive sometimes.
Yes.
Also, adrenaline kicks in.
Absolutely. Well, and I've learned I inherited my mother's reaction to stress and trauma, which is when it's something really big, I get very calm. I just make sure that everything gets settled before I panic. So I've been in scary car situations. I've been in my own personal trauma when I was attacked once, and so on and so forth. And I stay very calm until I know I or others are safe, and then I'll freak out. So there's a thing that adrenaline and fight or flight, or your reaction
had
does.
a fight or flight thing that taught me. I always think of it as an actor and as a human, how you are still an animal.
Yep.
I won't go into my full 9/11 story, but I was in grad school, as I mentioned, I think in the last episode, right? Yeah. And we didn't know if school was closed or what was happening. And so eventually I ended up in a sort of atrium with an open, ceiling, because there was no ceiling. And I heard a plane. And I just ran. And then I stopped very shortly and started laughing at myself.
Yep.
Because if that was a plane, me running was not going to help.
Nothing.
Yeah. And then my friend came up and she's like, "It's okay, we're fine. It's one of us." And I was very calm. And then for the rest of the time, I was sort of in this sort of denial. So my brain didn't get what was happening, but my body did.
Absolutely.
So that can happen too.
Well, I found out when I was attacked by some unknown men to this day, but I I've always said that I would like to think that I'm a fight or flight person, but I also hope that I'm pragmatic enough to get out and take care of myself and not put myself in unnecessary harm. And I found out in that scenario that apparently I was both. I fought to get myself out of it, and then I got out. But something I found very interesting with the lizard brain, as we call it, is that in those moments, your brain stops making linear memories. I found this out in
I've
PTSD
heard, I have
therapy.
heard this, yes.
Yeah, so there are things that you will not conceptually remember after the fact. There are things that are sense memory that I have from that, but I'll never remember the moment to moment that we do in normal life. I wouldn't be able to give you a linear story. And it's because you just do what your body tells you you need to do. And that part of that cerebral human part of your brain shuts off until it's ready to come back.
Fascinating.
It fascinates me. So I love that he says, everyone thought I was so calm and I wasn't. The guy came in at 4:42 p.m. and 28 seconds later, we went to black. We cannot allow people with guns or weapons of any kind to take a television station hostage.
And that's what Miles does.
This is what happens with Miles.
Yeah.
So it said apparently he scoped the studio out before. He came in days prior. He said he was the gentleman's son who he was, and that he had never had an opportunity to see his dad while he was on air, and so he came to watch. And they said he seemed a little unstable or maybe not very bright, but they wrote it off because he knew someone. He said, the man who has appeared on KNBC for the past 3 years is not my biological father. He is a clone, a double created by the Central Intelligence Agency and alien forces. It is only a small part of a greater plot to overthrow the United States government and possibly the human race itself.
Now, wasn't it a toy gun? Because that surprised me.
It was a toy gun, and that's why he was taken to custody within a few minutes. Because what he did is he came up behind and no one could see what the gun was.
Of course.
And so Horowitz said he just kept thinking of his wife and kids. I didn't know if the guy was a terrorist or a wacko or somebody trying to get even for something. My fear, he said, was that if any police came into the studio and there was a marksman there and he fired at this guy, I might be caught in the crossfire, or this guy might pop a shot off and get me through the back of the head or whatever, because I was not aware of the fact that this guy had a toy gun. So he did what he said, and he read the statement. And he said when he finished the statement, Stolman said, "Thank you, David. I couldn't have harmed anyone with this unloaded BB gun." He put the pistol down on the table. The co-anchor grabbed it, and the police swarmed in to make the arrest. And they said you can't even call it a pellet gun. It was just for children. But the fact is you don't take a chance.
No.
But that's what inspired this episode, was that scenario. And luckily, no one was harmed.
Yeah.
But
so back to the episode. When Henry introduces everybody, Corky cries when the gun is pointed at her. And then Henry introduces himself, but it kind of goes on a little too long. And Miles says, America is switching to 30-something. And this is our second 30-something.
30-something.
And in a row, right?
I think so.
Yeah, because it was in Baby Love also. Which is interesting because Corby told us that that's actually one of Diane's rules, is to not mention other television shows. So she was surprised when we brought it up that it was mentioned.
There's something about 30-something.
Something's in her craw about 30-something.
I love that Henry says, "I'm Henry Tucker, a gunman." That's when that's the thing, is that this episode, and maybe it was to kind of offset the serious nature of what was happening.
Because it's a sitcom.
You immediately, I don't know if a sitcom could do it right now, to be honest.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not today.
But the fact that we started off with, this guy is actually harmless. As long as everyone's nice to him, he will be harmless. The stakes are there, but also not.
And Robert Harper, who was on Gilmore Girls and LA Law and Picket Fences and Murder, She Wrote.
Yes.
He usually played these kind of like unassuming characters. So I definitely feel like the casting was on purpose.
The audience brain was like, he's fine.
Yeah.
He is harmless.
He's a comedic character.
Yes.
He may have a gun, but he's a comedic character. He asks Murphy to read the statement again. She says no. She says if every newsroom did that, they would be overrun with terrorists. And that the rule of all journalists believe in very strongly. And she goes to everyone, is that right, guys?
Well, I love it. It's a code of ethics that all journalists believe in.
Oh, I missed a word, yeah. And Corky yells, holding her tissue, read the statement. So it's sort of a little joke that Corky's not a real journalist. But she's going to work hard.
I have comments about Corky later and how she is misused as the weepy, weak female, which is completely natural, and anybody else would be weeping.
I think it fits into who Corky is at this time,
But there is something that happens later that proves that she's just as badass as the rest of them.
Yeah, but
No,
one
we'll
will-
talk.
Okay, we'll talk. Okay.
She's still a journalist and she's still a strong person.
Oh, yes, she is. So Murphy tells him that it's a losing battle because she figures that it's not a real gun.
Like the real story.
And so Henry shoots out a light because it is a real gun.
It's a real gun.
To which Corky gives one of my favorite lines in the episode. Because it literally cuts out the light above her. Oh, that's just great. On top of everything else, I'm poorly lit.
Because as far as they all know, they're still on camera.
Yes. And then she starts sobbing. And then Miles tells John that we better go to a commercial break, which of course is a great time for the real show to have a commercial break.
Interesting. So we come back from commercial. And what I love is that they say, like, we're back. And Henry's having his makeup touched up by the makeup crew. Because if he's going to be on camera, they might as well take away the shine.
I do love that. Also, these makeup people will be throughout the show.
Yes.
You know, the recurring background
And
artists.
it's smart on their part to make him feel included in the broadcast because it's putting him on their side. I mean, if you think about like hostage negotiation, they're treating him like one of them.
Sure.
As opposed to you're the bad guy. And I think that's super smart on a like micro level of how they're it's funny that they're putting makeup on him, but it's also if you're looking at somebody's holding you guys hostage, the more that you can connect that we are the same, the better. Sweet Corky's still crying. Frank comes around to talk to him, and as he stands up from the desk, we see that from the waist down, he's dressed for tennis in some short shorts, and he says he's like I've got a tennis match already scheduled for later, and he starts like kind of explaining for the camera in this sheepish way, and he's like, this is the first time he's ever done this, and which Murphy's like, Frank.
But my favorite thing, because it's Joe's delivery, he goes, I do have the pants.
I do have the pants.
And it said, like, I'm going to keep talking, you know, like he's about to, and Murphy's just like, we're done. But I just love that line reading.
No, I love it. It comes after the, yeah. So Henry shares that he's his favorite and that he lists all the great things that Frank has done. And he went swimming with a great white shark. He's done these scary, he lists all of the stuff that Frank has done, and it establishes Frank's.
Yeah, I think it's really great that we get to a sense of like what Frank does.
Yeah, because until recently, except for some of the headlines that they say that they're going to be covering, we haven't really seen who Frank is as far as his job in FYI. We've seen his relationships with the others, but this is the first time we get to see, we're like, oh, Frank is cool. And then he launches into that using it. I mean, like, they need to go do men things and eat steaks and drink. And then he'll go get Sheila and Dee Dee and they'll go out on the town. And then Henry stops listening to him and starts looking really intently at the top of his head. And he goes, I see the seam. And he like turns to announce to the crew and the cameras that is a toupee on Frank's head. And Frank goes, why don't you just shoot me?
Can we talk about the toupee, please?
Can we?
I've been wanting to talk about this toupee for most of my life.
Let's talk.
So this is my issue. I love the fact that he has an on-screen persona in a way with the wig and that he doesn't wear it in real life. How come he's never been outed if he doesn't wear it in real life? I also want to know, when he goes and swims with sharks, does he wear the toupee? Like, how does he go on
he wore a
assignments?
swim cap.
Okay, but still, so he goes on assignments and wearing the wig. Like, he seems to be in very scary, sort of, life-threatening situations, Frank.
Hats.
Okay. He walks around life
also,
without the
toupees have
toupee.
strong tape.
But he does. But he never wears it in the office. He comes in from stuff not wearing it. So he's out in everyday life without the wig. He dates women without the wig.
Yeah.
So how come no one knows?
Remember, it's not the internet TMZ culture.
Okay.
There's not, I mean, Murphy is a household name and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that Frank is like cover page paparazzi stock.
I just felt they were all known.
They are all known, but there's different levels of what the public's actually interested as far as social lives and their look. Frank is not the chic leading man that's being put on as like the sexiest man alive. Nobody's following him for that. They're following him for the story.
All
so
right.
I'd believe that people, and again, we're not looking at a regular like fashion blog who's following them and snapping pictures as often as possible. I truly believe that he can totally get away with like walking in, especially because the number of times that we don't recognize celebrities in real life because they're not dressed up and they don't have a camera
That
crew
could
with
be
them.
true. They maybe not recognize him because he doesn't have the hair.
We've seen him wear caps before. If he's on assignment and he's like in the bush somewhere, he's probably wearing a hat. He
It's a
could
lot of pressure, a lot of double life stuff there, Frank.
accept yourself, Frank. That's okay,
No ex-girlfriend talk to the tattler.
right? You're a good man. You're fine. You're fine without that toupee.
Oh, I think so.
I think he's perfectly fine. So Murphy has an announcement that she really wants a cigarette, and no one wants to hear it. And she says it's been a hard day, and she's like, I will pay $50 or $50. And then Carl appears from behind the cameras, and he says, I feel her pain. And he says he's going to give her one, and Murphy says she'll never forget this. And then Carl says the most wonderful thing of, you're a hell of a woman, Murphy Brown. He says, I love you deeply. And what I love is that Rich, who plays him, does this big breath and then this release out after he says that. He says, I'm glad I finally get to let my true feelings come out. Murphy, if we ever come out of this alive, I want you to be my woman.
I love the fact that everyone groans, meaning
Yep.
everyone knows.
Everyone knew.
Everyone knows that he is a crush on Murphy, except for Murphy.
Except for Murphy. And she's just staring at him holding the cigarette. And he says he's so glad to get it off his chest. And she holds it and kind of looks at him like, I may not smoke it right away, though. Yeah, I love that.
So Miles gets off the phone. He was talking to the network. It's the Nielsen Hall of Fame. The ratings are just through the roof. And he goes, Cosby eating my dust. Another television reference.
Yep.
Which, of course, makes sense. Like, that was the biggest show. So Miles sets the scene. The man is a maniac. The gun is loaded. You're all going to die. Go.
I love how he starts it with, let's not get lazy here. We're all going to die. Go.
And then Henry just says if she doesn't read the statement in 13 minutes, he's going to do something drastic. So Murphy decides that they all need to, the gang needs to huddle, figure things out.
You need a huddle sometimes.
I love that Henry's like, are you going to talk about me?
She's like, no.
No.
And she directs the cameras
away
to
from
not look
them.
at them.
Yeah. And so
I love how he believes them.
Murphy believes they have to come up with a plan. Frank's idea is that they should all rush him because there's so many of them that only one of them will die. Which I love that Murphy goes, new plan.
New plan.
And then Corky decides that she's going to take,
This is my moment for Corky.
You take it, take it. Tell us-
She has one of the greatest moments.
It's a great moment.
Because it's not just that she tries to seduce him. It's that she says she's not going to wait around for anyone to save her. She says
true.
that.
She
And
does.
she says sometimes a woman has to do what a woman has to do. And this is another moment of women not finding power in ignoring their femininity or sexuality, but being like, you know what? This is a tool. This is a weapon. If I take control of this, I can use it. And it's the same thing with, like, yes, we make fun of the fact that she's like, oh, my lighting is out and so on and so forth, but she's not a weaker woman for caring about that. She knows her brand. She knows who she is as a product.
I am not disagreeing
She
with
knows
you.
it. But I love that moment of, like, she says, I'm not going to wait around for anyone to save me. I was like, yes, Corky!
I love this scene. I love what Corky does. I love that she gets strong. I love that she
I
gets
love to hear her
upset.
accent.
But she's wielding a weapon she doesn't know how to wield.
Yet. But
Yet,
she knows
yes,
it's a
yet.
weapon, and she has the confidence to figure it out.
Because now, looking back at this,
Mm-hmm.
I know how experienced Corky is.
Uh-huh.
So, it's, again, but I
But I love that
admire
she's
her
like,
for
this
it.
is my weapon. She's not good at it yet,
I also love
but she knows it.
that she. Well, I guess we're skipping ahead though. But she takes her hair out, her ponytail, and whips it around, and walks over to him and asks if he's married. Like, it's all like little things that maybe she's seen other people do, or
Yep.
I guess works with the men back home.
She's trying.
And she's trying to let him know that she finds him attractive, and he should just stop all this nonsense, and they should go away together. She goes, "Okay, I'll wear the sash and crown." Wait, I'm sorry. Give you a night to remember.
Yeah, put the gun away and I'll give you a night to remember.
That's the line that got me, because I was like, Corky, you don't know that yet,
Ugh,
but you're trying.
she's trying. Fake it till you make it.
So Corky gets rejected. Oh wait, I did skip the best part too, is when she goes, "There's something about you that's dangerous."
He goes, it's the gun.
It's the gun.
You can hear like the ... in his voice. He goes, it's the gun.
And he says that he's so sorry, but he doesn't feel about her the way that she feels about him.
Which Corky's never had to worry about this kind of rejection.
No, of course not. Former Miss America, she can get any man she
she's
wants.
like, I am Miss America.
I open myself up to you.
It's so good.
I allow myself to be vulnerable. And you wipe your feet with me.
You wipe your face. What I love is when she turns around and goes, "We're dog food." That's so good.
That's so funny. I didn't know what she was saying. I thought she was saying "we're done for."
We're dog food.
Oh, it's the accent. Oh, that's so funny.
Maybe it is done for, but
I always thought
I
it
heard
would.
dog food.
I should have put it on closed caption. I always thought she said "we're done for."
I heard we're dog food.
That makes more sense, honestly.
I think
I think you're right.
my headcanon of the Louisiana girl is she'd say that's the one time she'd say something like dog food, but I might be wrong.
That makes sense because I thought it was "we're done foo."
We're done food.
I thought it was the accent thing.
Accents are tough.
I love that he's like, "What's with the accent?" I'm from Louisiana. I'm sorry, Faith. I can't do a Louisiana accent.
Yeah,
I'm
Faith
sorry.
does it better than both of us, but it
can't.
is wonderful.
So then Murphy starts singing to a cigarette.
She sings to her cigarette.
To a cigarette.
Holding it, singing to it. And Charles Kimbrough does the world's greatest dance. We've talked about the love of gym dance.
Oh my God, it's
These like
so held in.
fists, and they're bopping. They're just bopping back and forth.
I had never
like,
noticed
in the
it before.
background.
I noticed him and I was like,
Yeah.
what is he? Oh my God, what is he
It's
doing?
the best. It's you wrote tiny hand dancing, and it's
I
so
did.
true. It's like do 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 do.
And then like
Oh,
Frank
so
is
good.
lip syncing to Murphy singing, which I
Yes.
didn't realize, and kind of like moving his arms around. And then
And Miles is like drumming the desk from below.
It's so good. No, this song is on the Murphy Brown soundtrack.
Oh, is it?
Yes, which means that I had heard this years before I saw this episode.
Oh, funny.
In fact, I thought the Stop It was Miles.
Oh,
I thought it was him.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing to stop it, and then it would go in, dun, and it would go into another song.
Yeah.
I had memorized, I used to at least, not knowing what episode it was from or what it was. And so I was so excited when this show came into syndication and I could watch this episode. And I was like, oh my God, it's from this. And it's just such a great scene.
it's so good.
And
You see, they're all starting to crack.
pretty much, yeah. It's almost, something that you do after, you've been up studying for a really long time.
Like at this
and-
point, whatever.
Yeah. And Corky's even like, she's upset, but she's like shaking her leg a little bit.
Well, and she's like bobbing her head.
yeah. And he says, is this some kind of torture thing? But what's great too is that the lines, she's singing to the cigarette, set me free, what? I can't sing it right.
sing it.
Yeah. I can't sing it. Okay. Set me free, why don't you, babe? Get out my life, why don't you, babe? Ooh, 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 ooh. Because you don't really need me. You keep me hanging on. Why do you keep a coming around playing with my heart?
Sing along if you know it.
I feel like such an idiot. Don't you get out of my life and let me make a brand new start. Let me get over you the way you've gotten over me. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I call that my sexy NPR Lauren.
Sexy NPR Lauren, not sold in stores.
Only here.
Do you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, so the song is actually called You Keep Me Hanging On. It's a 1966 song written and composed by our good friends Holland Dozier Holland. We'll eventually just call them HDH. It became
I just like the way you say that.
Holland Dozier Holland.
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 Holland Dozier
Now it's a
Holland.
miser exercise.
Oh, God. So it became popular on the Billboard Hot 100. It was number one for the Motown group, The Supremes. I think we've heard of them before.
I think so.
They were on the Motown label proper, Funk Brothers, our good buds. The song's signature guitar part is said to have originated from a Morse code-like radio sound effect.
So cool.
It was typically used before a news announcement. How apt is that?
Look at that.
How apt can we be?
I think we can.
The FYI story. Turn.
Okay, so Jim's going to take over. And this is also one of my favorite moments. Jim.
I love it so. Jim.
Hey now.
It's the best. They're doing my inner monologue of loving Jim.
So he goes into sort of a very anchorman talk, and then even more so after he decides that he's going to talk about his past of being a journalist, because, he doesn't just put on an expensive suit and read the news. He's a real journalist. It was cold at the Yellow River.
Oh, God. I want to hear Jim tell me the tale for hours.
And then-
which he does.
Cut to, it's been a while, obviously, because everyone's bored. Murphy, Frank, and John are playing cards.
And I like that Murph has the cigarette in her mouth like an oral fixation. She's not smoking it. It's
I
just
know.
in there as like a comfort.
really love that. And Jim's like, you wake up and 30 years have passed, which is so interesting now, right?
Right.
I heard that line. I was like, oh my
Well,
God.
they have, actually.
You find dust in your sheets. You know what that is, Henry? It's little pieces of you that died in the night. And then Henry just goes, this is depressing. So finally, he can't take it anymore, and he says, "If you don't read the statement, I'll shoot her," and points to Corky.
And nobody cares.
I know, it's really sad. That's when I was like, no. That's when it bothered me a little bit, I have to say.
Like, they care when Miles gets grabbed, but they don't care when Corky, who is closer to quote unquote one of their own. That makes me so sad for her.
But here's the thing. I always thought it was funny before the recent climate.
Yes, exactly.
I always thought it was funny.
Because the snapping, again, we're traumatized by our current climate. And
I always thought that moment was so funny. But I think, honestly, it's also more about, because the way Murphy's like, okay, now. Like, I don't think it's necessarily about Miles. I think it's about, like, okay,
Stop it. That's the thing. They're still not taking him seriously. And I think that's where the dismissal comes from, is that they've seen this guy. He hasn't cracked yet. They've seen that he seems to mean well. He seems to care. He is respectful. So I don't think anyone believes that he is actually going to hurt them. I think they're all waiting for him to give up.
Yeah. And he's got the gun in Miles's back. It's really scary.
It's super scary.
Yeah. Miles pretty much demands that Murphy read the statement. She argues with him, and then he orders her as her boss, pretty much, to read it. To which Murphy says, "You're not one of us, Miles. You don't have the stuff."
Oh, my heart.
And then Murphy proceeds to read the statement, which she's so serious and so committed to it.
She's reading it like a normal copy.
She is. She might even agree with some of it.
I agree with a lot of it.
Candace just sells it. He's upset that people are driving slow in the fast lane.
As he says, the left lane is for passing only.
He's got a whole litany of things, actually.
And as I'm listening, it's like what we said about walking on the sidewalks of New York City. I was like, I don't disagree with you. I just disagree with your methods.
Yeah.
It's like really calm road rage from the gunman.
Mm-hmm. And he's nodding along every time she's saying it. Yeah.
And he says, let's hope it does some good.
Mm-hmm. So he says he's gonna turn himself in. He gives Miles the gun, and he says that if there's not a SWAT team outside, he's going to be disappointed.
You won't be disappointed.
You won't be disappointed.
And Jim just wraps it up. He just looks at the camera.
Yeah, and
this has been another edition of FYI.
It's great, and but only of course we find out later that
they have not been on.
They have not been on air. That as soon as he came on the stage, Miles called up.
Well, and did we say earlier, Miles, when he got off the phone and said Cosby eat our dust, like he said the Nielsen.
Yeah, he was lying.
Yeah, he was lying the entire time.
Yeah,
he was ramping it up to sell it, but he brought them to black the second that gunman showed
and
up.
Murphy is super impressed and realizes that he does have the stuff.
He does. And I love it because the way that Grant Shaw does it, he really is, he's very self-assured. He doesn't stand up to tell this, to prove himself. He's actually sitting back and saying, no, I cut to black immediately. And the way he said it, you see the professional in him. You see the potential of the professional in him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then I forgot, of course, before this is that Carl brings her coat, and Carl says, "Let's go somewhere where we can be ourselves." And he's so sincere.
It's not done in a kooky way.
It's not done for laughs.
And when she says she's going to give the cigarette back to him, he says, "I'm not going to give up," in such a simple, confident,
sweet way.
And it's so lovely.
They could have played this for laughs. Oh, the fat guy is asking Murphy out. And they don't.
And she doesn't blow him off. She's very respectful and sweet to him back. And what I love is the moment when he takes the cigarette back and he closes it in his fist and then kind of shakes it with this I'm not going to give up.
Yeah, and it's not creepy.
It's very sweet.
It's
I love him.
So everyone's hugging. They're so glad that it's over. And Miles asks if he can have a hug. Eventually, when they're by themselves, and at first she's like no, but then she goes, "Oh, what the hell."
When they come out of the hug, they're saying, "Are you okay?" Like, I genuinely asking each other, "Are you okay?" And then he says about the Nielsen ratings, like, I was this close to being that first episode of Roots.
And if people don't know, Roots was huge.
Huge. It was a miniseries starring, you may have heard of LeVar Burton. Mm-hmm. Kunta Kinte. It was industry changing. And it blew the ratings.
And you couldn't record it, so you had to be home.
Yep.
My mother was pregnant at the time, and she was worried that she would go into labor during Roots.
Oh my God, that's so specific, and I love it. It's true.
It is.
And what I love is as she walks away, she gives him her next story that she thinks is going to help his ratings, which is nymphomania, compulsive behavior, or just plain fun.
She's got him.
And the ending of our episode is we're back at Murphy's house, and Murphy walks in, and Eldon is there. He's painting.
Yes.
She wasn't expecting him.
It's midnight.
And she screams, and it's not a pretty scream. It is an ugly
Guttural
sound.
scream.
It is amazing. And his reaction is saying, "This is why you're not married."
And also, I realized like all the scaffolding is what we saw later.
Yep.
And so you can connect it back to the scaffolding also that it was filmed first.
Exactly. So because the last episode, she had a full living room set, and it was fine.
But before that, she had all kinds of scaffolding.
Yep. She starts ranting at him because it's like the last straw. She survived all of this. It was the worst day ever. She says, "You're supposed to be here for a 3-day job, and you've been here for 3 weeks." And he proceeds to say, "I'm an artist. I see things." And he points to the wall and he says, "I thought it was this, but no, it's Florentine sienna." And then he does like the pre-Grover meme, which is, "Look over there. Now look back. Big improvement." She just starts talking to herself in the same way that Frank was saying earlier, that just like hour by hour, she just goes, 15 more minutes and this rotten day is over. And as she's walking away, Eldon says, "You think you had a bad day?" Well, and he starts going off on this paint store epic that he went through where he needed like Burmese gold and scarab green mixed. And they did 2 parts scarab green and 1 part Burmese gold. And people don't take pride in their work anymore.
I love it. It starts with the turkey roll.
Starts with the turkey roll. So beautiful.
And that is another episode of Murphy Brown.
And it's, let me tell you, risky episode that really paid off. And it blows my mind.
So maybe that's why they
did that.
They kind of pushed it then. Maybe they felt like it was better after the show was more established.
And I think that a lot of the things that happen, her going for the cigarette machine, even Carl, a lot of things pay off in a really satisfying way. I think being done later.
So much better and nothing that was planned. And sometimes you get the most interesting things when you don't plan something and you have happy accidents.
Well, and we're way more invested in who they are. So the risk that they may be hurt hits so much harder now than if it was the second episode.
And we had a lot of episodes where it was Murphy with Corky and Murphy with Miles
Now
and
it's
Murphy
the
and
gang.
Jim. And now
Yeah.
it's the gang. So that's kind of nice.
And the gang together and how they handle stress.
If you are not following us on social media,
Please do.
Please do.
What are you doing?
Or if you're only following us on one social media, follow us on all social medias.
We do different things on all the
We
social media.
do. You might miss something.
Like, for example, last episode, Baby Love. Instagram, we put up young baby versions of us.
Yes, to match the opening montage.
Yes. So
But
who knows what we're going to
that
post.
wasn't on Twitter or Facebook.
Wasn't.
So we are the same everywhere. We're Murphy Brown Pod,
Yes.
P-O-D. We're also murphybrownpod.com.
MurphyBrownPod@gmail.
Yes, so definitely send us an email. Or you can leave us a voicemail, a short message on how Murphy influenced you or how excited you are about the new revival, something short. You can say your name. You don't have to say your name if you don't want to. If you don't want to call the number, you can record a little voice note on your phone and email it to us at murphybrownpod@gmail.com.
Yep.
And we'd love to include it in the show.
We would love to. We really want to connect. We are, as you may have heard last episode, we are very excited about
So-
what's happening.
That phone number is 646-450-6902.
Or send us an email or contact us on the social media. We are checking them all the time, and we love hearing from you.
So next week, our episode will be And So He Goes by Cy Duquesne and Denise Moss. This will be their first episode that we talk about, so
Very
that's exciting. We're
Yeah,
really
we're-
bad at saying stuff at the same time.
We're so good at it, you mean.
I'm sorry, yes, we're so good at it.
And we'll see you next week,
For another edition of FYI.
the Murphy Brown Podcast. Room indeed.
Oh, it's a bus.
Why is he driving here? There isn't a school next to me. But why are they driving here? I don't know. It's a one-way that goes into the park.
Maybe it's a drug mule.
They can't be going to that one because it's a one-way going that way.
That's my headcanon. It's a drug mule.
Probably.
It's like saying drug mule.
I think you're good.
Okay.